Hey painting friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Stoof and I'm a fine artist from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I typically do painting tutorials of either a landscape or a concept that I think of or something that one of you guys request for me to make into a painting tutorial, but a couple weeks ago I broke it back down to the basics and we did a video lesson on the color wheel and how important color is in a painting. This week we're going to keep with that same scheme of things, but we're going to talk about something that's even more important than color in a painting: value. So value, or tone is another word used for value, is how light or dark each little thing is in a painting. So why is value more important than color in a painting? Have you ever seen a monochromatic painting, meaning it's all black and white or there's only one basic color scheme, but the painting still looks realistic? It might not have accurate colors, but it still can read as a very realistic painting. I've seen some amazing black and white or monochromatic paintings that are very realistic. Now I want you to think about a very colorful painting that doesn't have any change in value. It's just blocks and pops of color. That might look really cool. The first thing that comes to my mind when I think of that is pop art, or maybe abstract minimalism, but those are not realistic. Those don't have any change in value. We just have standard pops of color that are super vivid and fun to look at, but they're not realistic. Whether you do painting as a hobby or if you do it professionally, if your goal is to create a realistic painting, then value is going to be even more important than color for your work. Value is responsible for a number of things in your painting. Number one, it creates a focal point in your painting. Anywhere in a painting, if you have a big contrast of light versus dark, your eye is immediately drawn to that lightest spot of the painting, especially when there's darkness all around it. You just want to find that little bit of light where there's that big contrast in value. It draws your eye into a focal point on a painting. Value is also very important in landscape painting for creating depth. If you happen to have problems with your paintings looking flat after you're done with them and they don't have a sense of depth, that's probably because you need to work on your values. For example, when I talk in my tutorials, I always like to talk about how your values in the far distance are usually lighter and there's way less contrast in your value in things that are in the distance versus things that are in the foreground. So if you have a pine tree in the foreground, whether it's in shadow or not, that pine tree is going to have a lot more contrast in general than a pine tree on a hillside a mile away in your painting. That tree out there is going to have very little change of value between highlight and shadow, and it's probably going to be lighter in value in general than the tree in the foreground. Of course, there are always variations to that rule, but in general, that's something to think about when you're painting. Value not only can create depth in a landscape where you have something in the foreground and something in the distance, but it can help to make things not look flat or help create depth for just a standard object in a still life. So say you want to paint an apple or a pear or a bunch of grapes. You have changes in value where you have a light source, casting shadows, creating highlights, and by including all of those little variations in light, you're going to make that apple or piece of fruit or cup, whatever you're painting, look so much more realistic, having actual shape to it and not just looking like a flat circle or a square. It'll actually look three-dimensional because you have a shadow on this side. If your light's up here, you got a bright highlight here and then a transition from highlight to shadow that helps to create that three-dimensional look. I see a lot of beginner painters struggle with value a lot. Things look very flat, and this is so important for you guys. It's really important for professionals as well to just touch on this topic, but for you beginners, value is so important. Even more important than color. I'm going to keep saying it. One thing you guys can do to help yourselves with your painting and help to make things look more realistic is to practice painting with no color. Practice painting in black and white. Remove the color completely and just work on focusing on the highlights and the shadows and the range of depth with light and dark in your painting. And once you master that, Then you can start to add some color. Some of the old masters actually used to create paintings that way, and many artists still do this as well, I guess. They will completely make a painting monochromatic, so they're just using one solid color and using their values. They're going from light to dark, but all sticking to that one color. If they're using color at all, typically it's like a brown, earthy color, and they will completely fill in a painting, just pinpointing where shadows are and where highlights are by like wiping away the paint in spots where highlights will be. And then they go back and they'll add color in the next layer over top of that base layer of paint. And this helps them to understand their values and make the painting look realistic. And that's one of the things we're going to do today. We're going to do some exercises to help you focus on value in a painting and how it can be applied to your entire art career. We're going to take a photo, we're going to reference this photo for a painting, we're going to take away all the color from the photo so we only look at our values, and then we're going to recreate that painting, and we're going to be conscious of the values in the painting when we're looking at our photo and translating it into a painting. But before we dive into that, we're going to start with something even more basic. We're going to start with simple value charts. So we're going to take some white paint and some black paint, and we're going to start with just a grayscale value chart. Before we dive into all of our exercises for today, make sure you hit the subscribe button below this video so you don't miss my weekly painting tutorials. And as always, if you have recommendations for painting tutorials you'd like to see, then leave a comment under this video and I will add those to my list of things to paint. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is talk about the Denman-Ross 9-step value scale. Here we have 9 steps all the way from white to black. We're going to create different values all the way from light to dark. Here we have acrylic paints. I just have titanium white and Mars black. We're going to start with some titanium white, and we're just going to put a little paint right there. That's for our white. I'm going to wipe off all the paint from my brush. Then we're just going to grab some Mars black, pure black, and put this right here. So now we've got white and black. Next step is to mix a mid value, so somewhere halfway between white and black. And you're not necessarily going to need equal amounts of white and black. Like I mentioned in my color wheel video, every brand of paint mixes their pigment differently, so you may need more white than you think to get a middle tone or a mid value. And this isn't the easiest thing to do. So if you get this wrong or your values seem off the first time, just try it again. It's not a big deal. It doesn't take that long to do. So I'm going to put this one for my mid value. And we'll see how the rest of this turns out. So next we're just going to start adding some more white to our mid value, and we're going to try to get our low light. I think that may have been a little too much white, so I want to get something halfway between those two. Looks good. Okay, so we'll put this for low light. As you can see, this is a little bit lighter than our mid value. And then take a little bit more white, keep going lighter. We have 2 more blocks here before we get to white. So we want to keep lightening it up. Put this one for light, and then we'll add some more white. This can be our highlight. So we have white, highlight, light, low light, mid value. Now we're going to start with this mid value and add a little bit more black. And this will be our high dark, be a little bit more black. And we'll add some more black to get dark. And some more black. You get low dark. And then we're at black. And we can try this a bunch of times. Let's try it one more time and see if I can get that middle value maybe a little bit lighter, because it seems like it's a lot closer as we're getting to the dark values, and there's a big jump right here. So let's just see how we can get that to turn out if we try it one more time. Just going to use a different brush for my pure white. And then we'll try mixing just a little bit of black. We'll call this our highlight. Add a little bit more black in there. Call this one light. It still was a big jump there. Blue light. Mid value. High dark. Dark. Low dark. There, I like how that one looks better. So the more you practice, the more you can get a nice even value from white down to black, nice transition of value. And you can also do this with a color. Basically, you start with your base color, and then we will add some white to create a tint. So anytime you add some white to a color, you're creating a tint of that color. And you can add black to create a shade. So going lighter in value creates a tint, going down in value or darker in value will create a shade. Another thing to think about is when you start with a color and you add white to it, or you start with your color and you add dark to it, you're losing the intensity of the color. So anytime you mix white or black into your color, you are going to lose the intensity of your color, which is important when you're creating a landscape painting and you want to create depth, because things farther away in the distance, features typically have less intensity than a feature in the foreground. The color is much more intense in the foreground than it is in the distance. And you can practice this with any color or with every color if you'd like. I'm just going to use this Magic Fly brand blood orange color, and we'll see how that turns out. So I'm going to start with just this color, and you can, like, this color itself is not the most intense color. It does appear that this blood orange color is a tint of a more intense red. A lot of the Magic Fly colors kind of look like that to me, like they added a little bit of white to them. They're not the most intense colors. All right, so we're going to start with that, calling that our mid value because we didn't add any white or black to it. Now let's just add some white. Make our way up all the way to white. Keep adding some more white. And it's really good practice to do this with your colors as well, because if you create value charts for all of your colors and then you take those out with you if you go to do some plein air painting, or you just keep them handy when you're going to do some painting, you can look at them and reference them and see it'll help you to see what values you're working with. So we could have made this one a little bit lighter, I think. There we go. Something like that, maybe a little bit more color. There. And then same thing, wipe the paint off your brush, but now we're going to add black. Start right here. Dark. And it looks really pretty, but we did lose the intensity of the color for sure. And then we basically would just have like black. So there's just a little exercise to help you practice your different values. Like I said, you can keep this value chart with you when you're creating paintings and be mindful of what values you're working with. And most of the painting value range is up here. Your painting is said to be in high key. And if you're creating a painting where your value range is down here with the darks, then your painting is said to be in low key. Those are just some terms that you can use when describing a painting. When it comes to fine art, many professionals believe in keeping a narrow value range in your painting. They recommend using no more than 4 different values. And this is just going to help to create harmony in your painting. If you feel like your value scale came out terribly wrong, then you can buy value scales. I will leave a link to value scales you can purchase in the video description. So what we're going to do next is we are going to take a look at that pine tree photograph that I converted to black and white, and we are going to recreate that as a painting. Okay guys, so now we are ready to take what we did here and apply it to a painting together. This is going to be a monochromatic black and white painting, and we're going to look back at this pine tree image. I'm just going to use 2 brushes for this to keep it simple. We're not going to focus on the brush work too much because we're going to focus on the values the most, okay? That's why we removed color too, so we don't have to worry about color. And I'm going to do this a little differently than my normal paintings. I'm just going to start at the top, go down to the bottom, but I'm not going to sketch in anything yet to get started. All right, so if you look at our reference photo, you can see that the sky is the lightest thing in this painting. There are a couple other things that are about the same value as the sky. There are some highlights on branches in the foreground, but in general, the sky is the brightest part of our painting. So I'm going to mix in just a tiny dab of black. So the color we have here is a highlight. It's lighter than the highlight color on this value scale, but it's got a tiny bit of black in it, so it's not quite true white. And I'm just going to take this color and we're just going to go back and forth and cover up this little canvas at the top here with that color. That's our sky. I'm going to show you how we use this value scale in correlation with building depth in a painting. So we just painted our sky. It was a nice highlight color compared to the white on this canvas. You can see a little bit of a difference there. And now we're starting to move to the hillside that's in the farthest distance back. But we can still see the hillside there. So we're going to mix a little bit more black. And we're going to add this little sloped hillside here. And then once we get that down, we're going to take a little bit more white and fill that in and just go back and forth until you get up to that first line that you painted in. And this is because this is how we see things in nature. There's like a little bit of a darker value at the top of our mountains or hills usually, and it gets lighter as you move down. And then we'll move to the next one closer to the viewer, so we're adding more black now, going down in value. Where we are here is still pretty light though on the scale, as you can see. And we're going to add this one a little bit closer. There could be another one that kind of comes up from here. I'm going to get the extra paint off my brush. Sometimes if you get a little too much dark paint on your brush, you're just going to spend forever reblending white in to get back to the right color you want. So I just took the extra black off of there, and now I put a little white on my brush and I'm blending up So blending is another important tool in painting, but we're not going to talk about that too much in this video either. We'll talk about that more with brush strokes when I do a video on that. All right. So we got those hillsides looking good. Now we're going to keep moving forward, getting just slightly darker in value. Just adding a tiny bit more black. And we've got this bigger tree line here. And I'm seeing that maybe I made that a little too dark at the top here, so I'm just going to lighten that up by going back over it now. I feel like that looks better. And we need a little bit more white to blend in here. Bring this up a little more. Just blending that lighter color up into the darker color in the hillside. And then we've got more black, but we're still keeping the value in this range. We're still up in the top 4 here on the scale. There's just a little shadow here for this tree line right before. Let's do a little bit of brushwork there to show what we've got. And then we've got a lighter color here, or a lighter value here, where there's an open field. There, we want to be just slightly darker than the sky. We're not at the same value as the sky, but we're a little bit more of a shade from the sky color. You can add a little highlight there if you want at that tree line. And then we go back to this middle value color here for our trees. And this is when I'm going to switch to the smaller brush so I can show a little bit more of the detail in the trees without going too crazy with detail. But just pushing the brush up, getting a couple little trees in here. There's like a little tree line right here. You can blend some white into the colors that are already on your canvas if you want to lighten something up. Alright, we got another highlight here, super light, almost as light as the sky. And these trees over here we're still above mid-value and up, but we do have some deeper shadows right in here with these trees, starting to pull things closer to the foreground now, so we're getting a little bit more range and value. And there's a little bit of a highlight on these trees too here, so you can actually start to see some variation just in the trees as we're getting closer and closer to the front of the scene. A little bit more black there. One thing I noticed that beginners do is they want to go right for the dark colors when they're adding shadows, even if it's for something far away. And that, if you can recognize that you're doing that, you are going to help yourself a lot with building depth and creating realistic paintings. So as you can see here, we're getting closer to the foreground. This is probably still a few hundred feet away back, maybe even more than that. I'm not good at judging distance. But these trees here are much closer than those trees, but way back there. You can see the individual trees now. You can start to see individual branches, but if we're looking at the value scale, we're still only at mid value. We're not having black in any of our shadows here yet. No pure black. And we just got some more little shadows in there. Can add a little bit of highlights onto some of them where there's not too much change in value yet, but there is a highlight that's brighter than the stuff behind it. Go back to my shadow color here. All right, then we've got our highlight again over here. Another little field. And this value should be lighter than this back here, so I'm going to lighten this up a little more. Can mix a little bit of shadow here. All right, and we've got some more trees here that are a little lighter than the ones behind them. There's some shadows in there that are darker, but in general, this cluster doesn't look as dark. And we can add some highlights. Another deeper shadow here. You can start to see branches pulling even closer to the foreground. Add a little bit more black. We're starting to get a little closer to the high darks now. And then next we got some highlights that are somewhere in this range. Somewhere right around this highlight color again. It goes down into a shadow, somewhere closer in here. And our highlights are lighter right here. Go back to my shadow color for a second. Gonna add a little bit of white there. Got some highlights at the tops where light is hitting these trees. Then you get less highlights towards the bottom. Now we've got more black mixed in here. Now we're getting closer to this low dark color right in here. I'm just going to fill this in. Add a little white, kind of comes up in value a little as you're getting closer to the tops. And then we've got some highlights that are closer to the actual highlight color. Right here. So we're starting to get way more contrast and value now. So we went all the way from highlight to low dark here in the foreground. As the highlights come down more, they get a little bit darker. And I'm taking my shadow color again to try to build up a little bit more of the depth in here. Kind of gets a little darker right there. And then the foreground is, again, close to my highlight to light color. It's, value. If we're looking at the sky, oops, it's a little bit darker than what we have for the sky. Again, here in the foreground, we've got more shadows that are low dark. If we're talking value, these are really dark. Of course, the paint is still wet, so things are blending a little bit on the canvas. Putting my pine trees in, putting the shadows in first. It's a good tip for painting whenever you're, especially when you use oil painting. Helps to block in your shadows and darker features first, and then go back in and add your highlights later. So the highlight on this tree is really light. Got a really bright spot right here. Same with up here, it's pretty light up here. And one right here too. And then we mix a little bit of black in for our highlights as we get down more. Or on this side of the tree, things are more in shadow. So you have some highlights with the values lower. The tree there. Pulling the value down a little more for this one. Again, guys, I'm working really quickly here. I'm not really taking the time to put in the right brush strokes and not making it super detailed, but you get the idea. And we've got some little grasses and stuff in here that'll just kind of bring the overall value down a little, but there are some individual little highlights happening in here too. Guys, so looking at our little value study here, where is the first place that your eye goes? We don't have a necessary main focal point of this painting, but my eye is drawn right here first because we have the biggest range in value. We go right from a low dark all the way up to like a high light, almost a white, with this contrast of shadow versus highlight. And then after my eye's there, it kind of gets drawn back into the rest of the scene. So having this depth created lets me know that we've got some big trees right here, We can see more of the individual branches on the trees, so the brush strokes are helping us to build depth there as well. But value is one of the most important features here in building depth because we have this big contrast between light and dark in the foreground, and in the background, mostly everything is up here on the value scale, and we have less contrast between highlights and shadows. Everything is a little bit lighter back here. So we built that depth. We draw your attention into this contrast in the foreground, and then your eye kind of fades back into the rest of the scene. If you guys are new to painting and you haven't done this yet, you need to do this. You guys need to practice painting in white and black so that you can practice your values, and then try doing the same painting in color later and see how much you've improved by learning how to achieve the proper value in your painting. All right, guys, that wraps up this video on value in painting. I hope you found this helpful. Like I said before, value is more important than color. It's one of the most important things in creating a realistic painting, and it's really tough for beginners to grasp. So if you can focus all of your attention on value, it's going to help you tremendously with making realistic paintings. Good luck and happy painting, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.